We've just finished another new recording with Tom Connell, Davines hair artistic director. It's super interesting with some great insights into how he sees things, his passion, all those wonderful things. Can't wait for you to hear it. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Jack Howard Color, the podcast. Today's guest is Tom Connell. Tom's joining us from London. Very busy at the moment. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, Jack. Thanks for the invite. Glad to be here.
So, Tom, your career has led you to this point in your life where you're the Davines artistic hair director.
Mm-hmm.
But you started off in Manchester. Your parents owned a salon, yeah?
Yeah. They owned a salon in Greater Manchester in a town called Wigan.
And that's where it all began for you. So you, from a very early age, you were surrounded by hair.
Yeah, from as old as, or young as I can remember, I was running around the salon, going to the salon after school, doing my homework in the staff room, that type of thing. And then when I suppose, kind of became aware enough that I wanted money for trainers and football boots and things like that, my dad said, okay, if you want pocket money, you're going to have to work in the salon. And that's kind of how I first kind of got into, I suppose, the world of it beyond just my parents having a salon.
Right. And so what age was that then when you started out as a Saturday boy? I mean, I remember sneaking in being a Saturday boy at 13.
Yeah, 13.
Yeah. Child abuse now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Doing the towels, spilling hot coffee on myself and stuff. But it was kind of, it was good. I liked hanging around with, I mean, you've probably seen this yourself. I liked hanging around with the older crowd. I thought it was kind of a very cool older crowd that I was hanging around with. And it seemed like an interesting world beyond what your parents do for a job, which is never cool when you're a kid, is it? But
how was that for you as a young man at school, saying that you were a Saturday boy in a hair salon and that you wanted possibly to be a hairdresser? How was that in that time frame?
Yeah. I mean, you get the kind of the typical comments, especially kind of a school in Wigan that was a rugby school where you kind of you played rugby or nothing, and I was never really cut out for that side of things. I was into more the clothes, the music, the fashion, the going out with the older guys that worked within the salon. So it kind of, I suppose, kind of school and people that was my age, I almost felt like they didn't interest me as much as maybe the people that were 2, 3, 4 years older than me, that I wanted to be part of that crowd, I suppose.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I always found that I wanted to hang out with older people. I just thought they were more interesting than my age, my own age group. And so you started out your career. So obviously you had to be an apprentice, and you apprenticed with your parents.
Yeah, I did a short apprentice with my parents, and I think my dad could kind of see that I was interested when it came to training night, but the day-to-day kind of salon and my dad's salon that I'd been seeing that since I was a toddler, he could see I was losing a bit of interest in it, and he said, you need to move out from this town, and you need to maybe move to, say, the city centre of Manchester and get into a salon that has an artistic team that does photo shoots, to see this other side of the industry. So I moved to Andrew College in the centre of Manchester.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah, and then that opened my world up to like, oh wow, people do photo shoots, people do stage shows, and it kind of it really intrigued me, and it became my life. I lived with friends that were also trainees and assistants within the salon, so we all got a student flat in the centre of Manchester, and I suppose that was my university days, if you will, of staying up too late and being hungover for your training. But they were great days to look back on now. Really immersing yourself. Absolutely,
there's nothing like training and sharing an apartment with other hairdressers. I think you live and breathe it, don't you?
Yeah. We'd go home and we'd be looking at photographs that Tim Hartley had done and sticking them up in our kitchen units and wondering how these things would be created, because we didn't have the knowledge to know that at that time. But it was a very interesting time to look back on.
I think it's wonderful that your dad had the foresight to kind of say to you, right, you need to leave this. You're too familiar with this. It's too sort of easy on you, and it's not testing you, and to push you to go into town, into a bigger salon.
Yeah. He kind of saw I suppose saw a little bit of ambition, and he saw that, you know, I always say this, that when most parents were telling or most dads were telling the kids about, I don't know, Maradona or Pele, my dad was telling me about Vidal Sassoon and Trevor Sorbie. And that, so I was kind of, he romanticized the industry to me from a very young age. So I was like, I want to go and discover all this for myself. And so he was very keen on pushing me and me not getting settled in my local town.
And that's carried through your career a little bit, hasn't it? That not settled, because after 6 years in Manchester, you made the leap to come to London, which must have been, well, I know from my own personal experience, I mean, it's so different.
Yeah. I mean, where are you from?
So I'm originally from Lincolnshire.
Oh, right. Yeah. So you've kind of done that jump as well, right?
Yeah. Well, I've done a few jumps since then.
Yeah. You was America as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What was that like for you then? I mean, when was that in the time period? So I can kind of put some context.
2009.
Okay, so it wasn't that long ago then.
No, I've been 11 years. Yeah, 11 years.
You make the leap to come to London. London, definitely a different city, but also we were in the middle of a financial crisis, really, that had happened in 2007, 2008. And I came back to London in 2010, and salons were still reeling from that. Yeah,
and it's, I suppose, that's maybe the one good thing about being skint, right? The financial crisis doesn't necessarily appeal like it doesn't apply to you, because you didn't. I was coming out of kind of being a stylist for a few years, didn't really have much money, but I knew I wanted to work for Trevor. I saw him on stage do his one-man show in Liverpool, and I was like, I want to do that, and I want to do it working for him. And the more I researched and read about him, I knew I needed to kind of, I don't know, I suppose kind of create the ideas that were in my head. I knew I needed to further my education, and I liked the eclectic style that he had, from, I don't know, using round brushes to using razors to technical hair cutting. I liked the fact that he had this kind of freedom in what his company produced. So I set my sights on that. So I suppose I was so obsessed and so kind of preoccupied with, that's my life, and I don't want to know about anything other than getting this training and becoming in part of this world that had been romanticized to me, that I suppose I don't think I even kind of thought about any recession or anything like that, because I was kind of, when you go to Trevor's, you start back on almost an assistant's wage, even though you're a stylist, because you're doing your vardoing. So yes. I was living in a bedsit and doing that. So it was kind of, yeah, and like I said before, looking back, those are some of the most carefree, happiest times of your life, aren't they? Because it's just your craft and nothing else, right?
Nothing else at all in that. And yes, you do. So what was it like for you? So you'd made the leap, you come to London, and then you're obviously very disciplined, and obviously you've got a vision for yourself. At that point, you had a vision for yourself of where you wanted to go. But to go back to being a grown person to assisting, to vardoing, as you'd like to say, how was that for you on an emotional level?
Yeah, you definitely have those evenings where you go home and you think, how have I ever been hairdressing for so long?
Yes.
Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm just not good enough, because if I've been hairdressing for this long, I should be better, because that vardoing process, that 6 to 8 weeks, it's really about breaking you down to rebuild you. And obviously now, through going all the way through and to the point where I was the art director and I was checking people's final tests, I understand that's just part of the process. But when you're in it, you do question whether this is the right career for you, whether this is and now I watch, say, a documentary about a Michelin star chef, and you see those chefs go through the same thing, right? When they're trying to achieve that thing that's impossible, which is perfection. You think at that time you're trying to achieve it, even though you never do. I remember one time that I cut a graduated bob, and the person used more sections to check it than I'd used to cut it, which isn't a good start to cutting a graduated bob. But Yeah, that process is so invaluable. That 8 weeks is life changing in your career.
Absolutely. And people often talk about that they don't want to go through those kind of experiences. But it sounds like a cliche, but it's in those moments that your biggest growth is, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of that difficulty that you're going through, it's kind of that's what's changing you, right? That thing of, I suppose if you listen to anyone that's done something in with the career or their art or whatever, or a sports person, that it was always at those times where they felt like, I'm going to have to give this up, that they were just on the cusp of making like a little breakthrough.
Yes. Yeah. So some tears, but lots of joy.
Yeah. Definitely a lot of joy when you finally pass your final presentation.
Yeah, totally. And then, of course, you're on the salon floor in Covent Garden.
Yes. So then you kind of feel like you've cracked it when you pass your test and whoever tells you you've got the job, but then the real work starts to be like passing your driving test, right? You pass your driving test and then you'll start learning to drive when you're in the car, and it's, you're dealing with different clients, and, it was a real, and people are paying a lot of money when they come to that salon. So quite rightly, they have high expectations. So then I think it's about, at that point, it's kind of, and I always try and teach this when I'm speaking to students or doing any education, it's you can fall into a trap of sticking to the things you know work so you don't get any complaints. But then your day becomes very repetitive, and it must become very repetitive for your clients. And I don't necessarily think, I think a few redos or complaints or whatever you would call them are the best hairdressers that I've ever worked with have had the most clients come back because they were willing to try things. And I listened to one of your podcasts a few weeks ago with Luke Hersherson, and I think he said people are paying for an opinion. And I thought that was quite a nice way to put it.
Yeah, I was just thinking of Luke in that, because he said that he encouraged his team not to do, this hair dusting and a simple cut, but to actually give somebody a change and to sort of promote that. Because, of course, that's what we're there for in many ways. But the sort of visceral reactions from either the boss or from the client who's not happy with a change puts a lot of people off. But I think it inhibits our industry.
I totally agree with you, and I thought that was a really interesting conversation that you both have, because I could almost remember the time that I made the switch, where I went from taking like a very educational based approach, and I went from being owned by my techniques to owning my techniques. And sometimes I'll hear people say, like, okay, I have a graduated bobbin next, and then my lady at 3 o'clock is having a long layers, and then I have a half head highlights, and then I have a balayage. Well, they haven't walked through the door yet. So let's not start talking about your techniques. They're your techniques that are in your tool belt, but maybe they've been on holiday and they just need a little bit of darkening around the face and they don't need anything else. Maybe the fringe has grown out and they just need it widening slightly. And that's all you need to do with the haircut. But you can be transformative. And it was almost like I started to think of like trying to think of as a designer solving design problems rather than just application of technique. And I think any designer, whether you design this computer that we're doing this Zoom on, or you're designing a building or a color or a cut, every designer has a brief from a client. Every designer has a material to work with, a budget, a time limit to achieve that. And then you use your skills and your creativity to kind of solve that design problem. And the second I started thinking like that, my days became like so much more enjoyable, because I wasn't going in going, oh, I've got 10 clients today. I'm going in and saying, I'm just doing 10 design problems. And it might take me 15 minutes or it might take me 2 hours to do each one. I just don't know. But it's like quite like a rewarding way to have you spend your time, I think, when I did it like that.
I like the way you put that. I always talk about the technical and the feeling, and I like, obviously you need the technical to create, but I feel like when a woman's in front of me, that it's about the feeling that you create, and that's in the placement and the vision and how you see it. And so it might have a similar sectioning pattern, but it's not cookie cutter.
Yeah. And then your client, I suppose, with yourself and other people like that, are paying for your mind, not your hands. Because if you pay for your hands, you can be replaced, right? Because everyone's got, a lot of people can do a straight line, a lot of people can do balayage, but if they're paying for your mind and your taste, and as you said on the other podcast, your opinion, then you can never be replaced.
Right. The eye is what I always say. I always say to the youngsters that it's that you can't replicate. Nobody else can do your eye. It's your vision on there. Everyone can sort of do the basics, but then it's where you take it.
Yeah, and it's a rewarding way to work as well, isn't it? Then because
it's freeing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's lovely.
You're free, and it no longer becomes the grind of 10, 12, 14, whatever it is you do a day. It becomes enjoyable because it's a different process for every single person that's in front of you.
Yeah, and I think that's how you have longevity is in, and I don't mean longevity is in like a long career with many clients. I mean longevity is in just enjoying your job for the amount of time that you do it in your life, which is probably the whole point of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, so many hairdressers get burnout, and I think it's because they do exactly that. They see it as 10 clients, 10 balayages, 10 highlights, 10 haircuts, 10 bobs, whatever, and they don't see the person in front of them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's an interesting one, isn't it? I think that could be a whole podcast.
Yeah, design problems.
Yeah. Oh, even better. You've given me a title. Thank you.
There you go.
So you're on the floor and you have this epiphany where it changes for you. So from the technical to the design, as you call it, which is brilliant. That's so lovely to hear. And you become art director for Trevor.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, of course, Trevor's one of the interesting things I think about Trevor Sorbie is, and I know, John Spanson's a mate of mine and stuff like that. And it's like they're a commercial salon group that do commercial stuff, but then suddenly they've got this like fantastic art team that do stuff that sort of pushes boundaries. And Trevor and the company have been able to do that since the 70s, since the wedge. That was, I think, the first time I sort of noticed him was when that wedge came out. I mean, I had a wedge down here, and color-wise too. They can challenge you with their collections in their color, yet within the salon, there's great technical work going on as well.
Yeah, and I think that's been the kind of the great thing that they've always been able to strike the balance of between the kind of commercial and the. I don't really like using the word creative because commercial hairdressing is very creative as well. But it's I don't know, the conceptual and the commercial, let's call it. And I think Trevor has always understood there's a place for both. There's a place for the things that's going to serve the clients to build a really, really healthy, profitable salon group. But then also he understands to attract the best hairdressers, there has to be a creative progression within that side of things. So those two things, and I think that's why probably they've been so strong for so many years, because it isn't done for like commercial gain, it's done for the love of it. Yeah. It's not done for, we're going to create this collection because we want to sell a lot of education to, it's done because, well, the commercial salon group is where the money comes from. This is just done because we love it and it attracts the great hairdressers that want to work there. So I think that's the freedom creates the creativity.
And how was it for you going from, so obviously you must have been on the art team before you became the art director, or did you just make that, making the leap, the transition from on the floor where you're really comfortable with yourself at this point, then going into something that, again, really just pushes you because it's different, right? On stage is different. The images are different. How was that for you?
It was exciting. I went to a couple of hair shows and I kind of enjoyed them, but I felt like there was a different way to do them. But you can say that, but can you do it, right? It's a lot of people say those things. So I thought, okay, how can I show that to Trevor? So I decided to create my own show. So I hired a theatre in Chelsea and I shot a collection and created invites and invited a lot of people from the industry and press and just put my own hair show on, just for to kind of to see to myself whether I could do it in a slightly different way, the way that was in my head, and to show Trevor that I was serious about becoming an art team member and moving on. And he was really blown away by it. And as a result of that, we developed a young art team, and I became the kind of art director of the young art team. And then a few years later became the kind of full art director of the whole company. But it was down to that first show that kind of got my foot in the door type of thing.
And what I like about that is that you just got on and did that yourself. A lot of people would just sit back and be waiting for it to be passed to them, whereas you decided, no, I'm going to try this out, and I'm going to invite some people to it. So you took a huge risk. Yeah,
especially kind of financial at that time in your career. You don't when you first kind of getting your foot on the salon floor, you're still making your way up the ladder. So yeah, it was a huge risk, but it was just so enjoyable. And I keep saying it, I can go back to that now and look at it and like, wow, that was one of the most exciting shows, because we didn't know what we were doing. I was with some of my friends that worked at Trevor Sorbie that were helping me put it together, and none of us had ever put a show together. I remember we spoke to the lighting guy, and we sat down with the lighting guy at the Chelsea Theatre. None of us had ever lit a show, knew anything about lighting. And I'm trying to explain this kind of pale blue lighting that I wanted for the stage. And he kept getting it wrong, and it kept kind of looking very plain, almost like a chemist, like a super drug style lighting. Right. And one of my friends, I remember, he just said to the lighting guy, basically, he wants it to look like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but for 200 quid. And he went, oh, I can do that, no problem. And then he just created it. It was spot on. But that was kind of like, we didn't have a clue what we were doing, but it came together and it looked cool on the night. And I think that kind of rawness of it was what half of its charm, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a first, right? I think that when we talk about first, you can't ever replicate them. No. And that moment, can you? So that's kind of fun. And you stayed on the artistic team, obviously traveling around the world and doing collections, education, and you stayed with them. But in 2019, you left for Davines.
Yes, yeah. I began a kind of conversation with Davines, and I suppose kind of everything I've said to you is I'm always been kind of wanting to move forward creatively, and I really, the only thing that I really care about is looking back at the end of my career and not have left anything in the tank. Not have thought, oh, maybe I wonder if I could have done that, or I wonder if I could have created that idea, or I wonder if I could have created that show, or I wonder if that image would have worked. And I felt like once I visited the Davines village in Parma and I began speaking to some of the people, what I really loved is that everything that Davines stands for outwardly is 100% authentic all the way through. You speak to anyone, and I know you've kind of had probably some conversations with some people at Davines now, and maybe you've realised that as well. Like the authenticity that runs through every aspect of what we do is so true, and I loved that, and I felt like if ever I was going to leave Trevor's, I would have to maybe start my own thing, because I wouldn't find that authenticity that I had at Trevor's anywhere else, and I felt it straight away, and I was like, okay. And when they showed me this portraits of people concept and the new direction that wanted to go with the hair identity, I was like, this kind of suits my aesthetic. I love the products already because I use them, and I like the ethos and what they stand for. And I thought, okay, let's kind of take this next step on the creative journey, I suppose.
The Davines, of course, have their B Corp certificate, which is all about their sustainability and the way in which they recycle and all of this stuff. And they're really, really low, their carbon footprint. I mean, it's very, very low, and they're still pushing for more. And I know that when I used View, and I was told that it breaks down, biodegradable, breaks down after 28 days in the water. I couldn't believe that. That was just absolutely fascinating that a colour house, for me as a colour house, could do that and make that, because so many product companies are talking about sustainability and doing pieces, but whereas Davines have gone the whole hog.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's as you say, it's the research and development that goes into those colour products, and you're right to call it a colour house, because that's what we are, and the research, the development, and the extra cost, time, and attention that goes into doing something like that means that what you say outwardly and what you stand for and what you get out of bed to go into work for every day is true. And that's kind of it's an amazing thing to be a part of, because you feel like you're part of more than something than just a kind of salary at the end of the month or a nice, pretty photograph in my case.
Well, we all like a nice, pretty photograph, don't we?
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about that in a minute. But I wanted to quickly touch on the village, of course, which I'm so jealous. I mean, I've spoken to Ashley about this. She's been to the village. You've been to the village. I've seen videos of it. I mean, this is where it all happens in Parma, isn't it?
Yeah. This beautiful space, about an hour and a half from Milan in Parma, where we have all the Davines products are made. We have the scientific garden. We've got academies. We've got beautiful bistro in the centre that brings the whole people together for lunch and dinner around the pond. It's a really, really remarkable place. I'm fortunate enough. In fact, this morning before I began speaking to you, I've just booked my flights. I go on Monday to go over there. So I'm looking forward to spending the week there again. It's been an unusual big start to my time with Davines. I normally would have spent a much more time there than, well, obviously without the pandemic coming in. But it's a special place, and it's the way that they've designed it, the simple design, but the detail that's in it, it reflects the products when you pick them up. You know, they're not overly busy, but they're very, very, very well designed, and that's what the space is. I'm sure when you go over and you do things in the academy rooms, everything is designed for you to do your best work. You know, from how tranquil it is, from the pond to the way that the academy is designed. It's just, it's very, very well thought out. It's a beautiful space. If anyone's in Parma, definitely go down and check it out.
So I wanted to talk to you, Tom, about what you brought to the table with Davines, because up until your arrival, the imagery was all very, we're not going to say creative. What was the word that you used earlier?
Conceptual.
It was all conceptual. Yeah. And a lot of hairdressers love that, love those kind of images. And you brought something completely different to the table. You brought something a little bit more commercial into the conversation. Mm-hmm. Was that, and that's just a natural flow for you, I gather, from our conversation right now?
Yeah. So I like to kind of assess the true needs of Davines as a colour house. So I spent a lot of my first time with the company speaking to members of the community and finding, okay, what do you want from your colour house? Because those that, you know, you might be employed by Davines, but the clients are who you serve, the Davines customers, and so really, what do you want? What do you look for from Davines? And what I found was two things. You find some people that they want practical salon education. They want practical salon images. They want to see a beautiful image that looks like their client can engage with that person, and understand that maybe you're not reinventing the wheel, but maybe you're just taking the client one step ahead. And they want services that they can introduce to their client. But then I spoke to some people that said, okay, yeah, that's nice, but we have our training in Salon. What we look for from Davines is to be inspired. I want to be excited. The reason that we have Davines in the Salon is because we love the ethos and the story and the creativity of the company. So they are looking for conceptual and for inspiration. So when I looked at what we needed from our photographic output, I think that's a lot to say within one collection. I think it really is a lot to say, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, and then you don't see anything to the correct amount, right? It's not commercial enough. It's not creative enough. It's, you know, you can't fulfill things. So we decided to separate it, and we did a conceptual collection, light, time, and color, which isn't meant to be. It can be executed on a client if your client was kind of quite open to that sort of things, but it's more meant to be an image. It's meant to provoke a response, like a piece of art, something that you may hang on your wall in the salon to show what you can achieve when you use the Davines color products creatively, but more to provoke conversation, positive or negative, I think, because I think that's what any art should do. But then we had shadow prints and sculpture prints that are more of a lifestyle salon collection, something that you could show your client and add to your business commercially. And I think, you know, it frees you up creatively, as you know, that then you don't have to compromise on conceptual or commercial, but also whatever someone's looking for from Davines as a customer or potential customer, we have the potential to deliver. And I think it was a nice way to work.
I think it's a beautiful way to work. And you're right. If you try and do both, then it ends up being a bit blah, right? And it can actually look a little bit old-fashioned. So to be able to harness the conceptual and then harness the salon, the commercial, in separate categories, and it still be part of one company is a really interesting way to approach it. Now, I watched you talking, not you, I wasn't stalking you. I watched you on video, and I can't find the video, and it's really frustrating because I'd liked it and commented on it. And you and Ashley had recently done a collection, and it was a sand color and this sort of ocean green. It looked very much like the Caribbean or somewhere. So these two colors together. And normally, if you talked about that within hair, you would say that that was really jarring and that you don't see that within real life. And you talked about the fact that this was actually something that was found in nature, and you showed the image of the two together, which I just thought was beautiful. But you had this really, I think the first person I've ever heard actually, and I can say that honestly, the first one I've ever heard that was able to talk about a collection that was to inspire or to cause conversation in a really articulate way that made sense to me.
Thank you. Yeah, it was the look you're referring to, the Pacific Ocean green. It came from the conceptual collection. As I said, that was something that was meant to be an image to provoke a reaction. And yes. What I always try to do is to, whatever color you're working with, it can be the most vibrant color or it can be the most muted color. It has to be a refined version of it. And that's something that myself and I've worked with Ashley since I began working with her is, okay, you can do any color in a refined way. You know, whether it might have a depth and a base, it might have a brunette base underneath it, and then you add the green. So it's got an earthiness to it. You know, that green that you mentioned, it was looking too artificial. It was looking, and forgive me for saying this, but a little bit too hairdressery image green at one point. I'm sure you know what I mean by that. And then we had to add a little bit of red to the green to just drop it. And it just looked more refined. It looked more tasteful. So what we were looking for is, okay, let's look where these two colors are found in nature. And I don't think you would ever look at something that appeared organically and feel like that it was clashing or jarring against each other. So we said, okay, let's look at this. And when I'd seen an aerial picture of the Pacific Ocean, and I loved that green. I think it was a YSL image I'd seen. It was an advert for YSL, and it was an aerial shot of the Pacific Ocean. I said, I love that green, and I'd love to do something that was quite solid, quite jarring. What color could we put next to it? And when I looked at that sand against the green in the aerial shot, I was like, this could work, because a refined green and a very kind of refined, like kind of sandy beige could work together on the right head with the right shape, and it kind of. But that, I suppose, it takes like a while to do. We had to do that over, I suppose, 6-week period.
6 weeks period to get the color where you wanted it to.
Yes, to get the color where I wanted it to get the shape, the balance, to get everything to feel like the composition. Because I suppose with that image, you're treading on a tightrope of bad taste. Like one step off, you're in really bad taste. So, I think when you play in the edges, when you're just about to go into bad taste and you stop, that's kind of where some interesting things are. But it takes a while there's a few prototypes of it that did step over. So.
Yeah, I just love that explanation. That's brilliant. And I actually loved the imagery for it too. I thought it's, and when I heard you talking about it, that's when it sort of made sense to me and it clicked. It was just really clever, I thought.
Thanks. Thank you.
So what's next for you, Tom? So obviously you're going off to Parma on Monday. Lucky you.
Yeah, so we just shot a capsule collection of the previous two collections. So that the previous two commercial collections, shadow prints and sculpture prints, we just shot a capsule version of them. So we took the salon services, the sculpt toning and the shadowing, and we kind of ran with those a little bit more. And we created a 12-shot collection of really pushing further on a couple of models what can be done with these salon services. So that's going to come out in around August. And then part of the reason I'm going to Italy on Monday is that we're planning the next collection shoot, and we're going to shoot in Parma. We're going to shoot at the village in the garden, and we're going to shoot in and around Parma in the wilds in the city. And we've got a really nice commercial portrait, but also editorial story that we're going to shoot to really show the kind of heritage and beauty of the surroundings that Davines comes from.
I'm looking forward to seeing that one. That's going to be great. Now, brilliant that we're able to start traveling again into some degree for work, and hopefully more things will open up. Mm-hmm. But you also continually work on projects on your own at home, pushing boundaries with texture and hair and all those things that will maybe resonate with the hairdressing community. What kind of things are you up to just on your own?
So I'm working on two projects at the moment. So I'm working on, I saw a photograph of Linda Evangelista, assuming it was kind of her early 90s. And she had a head bandana on with all of her hair out of the back of the head bandana. And There's something really interested in that shape. So I've been tracing that shape and figuring out a few colors and a few cuts that could kind of, when I see something like that, I think if it's pretty because of the shape. It doesn't need to be a head bandana. It could be hair that's sitting in that shape. And so I'm exploring that a little bit more. And I've shot a few tests of it. So I'm going to follow through with that a little bit more. And I've got a few kind of editorial stories I'm working on for different magazines. So I find that kind of, and you'll probably find this as well, one feeds the other, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It does. They definitely feed each other. It's interesting that you keep yourself busy with this virtually 24/7 with hair all the time. Yeah. Yeah,
I don't kind of. I kind of try and have a balance for a certain amount of time. As you said, you can get burnt out a little bit, but when it's time to work on a collection, whether it be a personal collection or it be a collection for Davines, I'll set like a time limit. So normally about 6 weeks out, then I'll kind of flip the switch, and then that's the only thing I think about. Like, I don't want to know about sport. I don't want to know who's texting me. I just think about that collection. And I feel like a collection, so it's got layers and it goes beyond like the aesthetic. You know, it's nice to have something that looks pretty, but so it resonates and people remember it. I think it needs to have like layers of inspiration. So I feel like to do that, you need to like feed a collection. So something as basic as if I was thinking of a collection that had a 70s feel to it, for example, I would only listen to 70s music. I would only watch 70s films. I would only watch 70s documentaries, so that the chances are I will see something or I'll notice something and I think that would work for the collection. That'll work for so you're kind of feeding it all the time. And then when you're doing it and you're coming up with things, or you're writing the information about it or creating the videos, those things kind of come into play a little bit. So yeah, I'm going to kind of have a little bit of time just collecting a few ideas and then turn that switch for the next collection in a few weeks' time.
So you completely immerse yourself in the project.
Yeah. There's kind of it's and nothing else kind of exists in that time. Just because I think that's kind of the only way I enjoy doing it, and the only way I can do it, and the only way I feel like I can do it to kind of get the correct result for Davines.
That's amazing. There's this huge conversation going on in the industry at the moment about, and it's really interesting. I was speaking to Leslie Jennison in another episode, and her commitment, and you're talking about your commitment and the hours that we put into it. And there's this huge conversation in the industry about burnout and about not doing stuff, and sort of the balance in life. And I find balance quite hard personally. I'm either in it or I'm not. And I sort of throw myself into my projects. Do you get lost in it? Because I know that you said that you set a time limit, so 6 weeks, and then that switch goes off. Do you stick to that?
Yeah, I really do. I don't like, I kind of always liken it to, I'll say it to my wife a few times, I liken it to, you should never be like a flickering light bulb. I think that's what leads to burnout, where you're a bit doing your emails and you're a bit doing with your family and you're a bit with your friends, and then I need to sort that model out for that thing next week. That's when, because then it's a stressful way to work, and I think that can lead to burnout. But if you quite like separate with your time, as in like, right, now it's family time, now it's friend time, now it's exercise and working out time, or whatever it is that you do for personal time. But then when it's time to turn the switch, it's work time. I feel, for me personally, that's how the healthiest way I've found to work. So I'm not that flickering light bulb, it's either on or it's off.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that explanation for it too.
Do you find that you do? Sorry, Jack. Do you find that because you're very busy, kind of with lots of different projects, I imagine, all over the place. So do you find that I'm assuming you've got to be very disciplined with your time to make sure that you give the right attention to everything, right?
I try to be disciplined with my time. What I've found is if I get a little bit haywire, everything is just like blah, and I hate it all. So what I try to do is I try to dedicate time to me, my personal self, in the morning before I start anything. So that I work out every morning, so at the weekend, and then I try and dedicate some evenings to seeing some friends or something like that. But kind of the phone is on a lot with stuff going on. But I've also recognized that I can't be messaging people at 10 o'clock at night with like, oh, I've just had this idea. I have to respect other people's boundaries too. And so voice notes aren't going out as much anymore. And also, you know, it's been easier for me because my partner is sort of 1 month here, 1 month in the States, 1 month here. So I've got this whole month where it could be sort of like me and everything I want to do. And then when he gets here, I've got a week while he's jet lagged that I can do all of that. And then I've got like 3 weeks where I've really got to kind of say, let's go out for dinner, let's go enjoy each other, let's be us. So I have to be aware of the fact that I need to look after the other parts of my life as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good, healthy way to be. And I suppose if the end goal is to be the best hairdresser that you can be, that's the best way to do it, right? Because then that's how you're going to be a good hairdresser for a longer period of time, because you've found that health and balance. Yeah,
I want to be the best version of myself, if possible. Do you know what I mean? And there are days when I undoubtedly fail on that. And there are days when I'm like, oh, that wasn't a bad day, Jack. That's okay. But, you know, in the failure, I always kind of want to have a look at that and kind of see was that a failure because I hadn't added the commitment to it and the energy to it, or was that a failure and it was just a learning curve? So I try not to beat myself up too much about it.
Yeah, good. I like it.
Tom, thank you so much. I know that you've got a busy afternoon. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And I look forward to seeing you in the flesh at some point.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for the invite. I really enjoyed it.
Now, really nice conversation there. Thank you for taking the time and talking with us.
Cheers. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you. Today's roundtable is with Tom Connell, Davines Artistic Hair Director. It's a great one. I hope you enjoy it.